Well, I want to thank you for joining me for yet another devotional moment. I want to turn your attention to the book of Job. The book of Job is found in the wisdom literature of the Old Testament because there's much wisdom that we can derive from Job. Doubtless that you know the story of Job. Job was a righteous man. He was blameless before God, but for purposes that he nor we understand, all things that he had for him were taken away. His children, his possessions, his wealth, all these things taken away from a righteous man. We find him dealing with the lowest of the lows, having his wife tell him to curse God and die, and then friends who show up and accuse him of doing wrong because they have a presupposition to know that God is just, and if God is just, then he must be punishing Job for something that he did wrong. With friends like those, who needs enemies? But Job argues that he did nothing wrong, and we know that he did nothing wrong because God himself calls Job blameless and righteous and calls him his servant. But after a long discussion with his friends, Job even begins to blame God and wrestle with him. We may find ourselves in a place where we are asking the question of God, why? Why did these things take place? Why did these things happen? And if we read the book of Job, we know that the answer to that question is never really realized. But ultimately, what it comes down to is trust. That we are to trust in God, even when the circumstances and the situations are difficult, are trying, and we are suffering. Job finally realized that that's exactly what he must do. He must put his trust and faith in God, even when it seems as if all the world about him is crumbling at its foundation. One place I like to look in the book of Job is Job 23 and verse 6. And this is from the New King James Version, which says, "Would he contend with me in his great power? No, but he would take note of me." In the King James Version, what we see here is, "He will put strength in me." Simply this, that when we find ourselves in times of trouble, we must understand that God will put strength in us. That's exactly what he does. That strength, the sovereign power of God that once was meant to crush us as sinners, now lifts us up out of the dung heap, gives us strength to go through difficult times. It is faith in God that overcomes all things and makes mountains look like molehills and makes rivers run dry. Our faith in God is the strength that we must have right now. I like what Charles Spurgeon says about this very text in explaining what he sees in Job's suffering and strength, and the idea of faith that we must have in God. Spurgeon says, "Whenever I find faith, I believe God will put strength into the man. I never think anything to be impossible to a man with faith in God. While it is written, 'He will put strength in me.' Go on, Christian, for this is your promise. He will put strength in me. Doubtless that this is also what the Apostle Paul knew when he said, "For I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me." Paul in Philippians was talking about the things that he had overcome, the things that he had won the victory over, because exactly that, Christ is the one who put strength in him. Friends, today, Christ is the one who puts strength in us. When we find ourselves in difficult times and uncertain times, times of trouble and of torment, and we are asking ourselves the questions, why? We must do this. We must put our trust in God and know that He will put His strength in us. God bless you.